All right, ready for another deep dive? Today, we're stepping back into history, 14th century Africa, to be exact. We're going to meet a ruler whose wealth, well, let's just say it still gets people talking. Mansa Musa.
Mansa Musa, yeah, his story is incredible.
We're talking an empire at its peak, gold that would make your head spin, and a legacy that, well, it echoes through the ages.
It really does. And it's not just about, how much he had, right? It's about what Mansa Musa tells us about the Mali Empire on a global scale.
Exactly.
This was a kingdom going toe-to-toe with the biggest power players of that time, and his wealth, it was a symbol of that.
Totally. And we've got all these sources, historical texts, travelers' tales, even a map.
A map.
Yeah, from 1375. It points right to Mansa Musa and says, quote, "This king is the richest and noblest of all these lands." But how do we even wrap our heads around that kind of wealth today? It's almost unfathomable.
Right. It's almost like trying to imagine what a billionaire would have meant back then. The concept's so big, it's hard to grasp. So we've got to dig into the sources, right? You're talking the writings of Al-Umari, historical records from Timbuktu, even these whispers of oral histories passed down over generations.
Wow.
It's like we're putting together this puzzle where some pieces are solid gold and others are, like fragments of whispers on the wind.
I love that analogy. So let's dive into this treasure chest of a story. First things first. Who was Mansa Musa?
Okay, so Mansa Musa, he was the 9th Mansa.
And Mansa means?
Oh, right. King or emperor of the Mali Empire. And his reign, we're talking roughly 1312 to 1337. That's considered like the high point.
The peak.
The peak of the empire's power, influence, everything.
But all that wealth, it's not like he just tripped over a giant gold nugget one day, right?
No. The Mali Empire was strategically placed. Really strategically placed.
How so?
At the crossroads of these incredibly lucrative trade routes. Imagine caravans, right? Laden with salt from the Saharan mines in the north, and they're heading south.
South
to trade for gold from regions like Bambouk, Wangara, Bura.
These were like the beating heart of the empire's economy.
Exactly.
It's like holding the winning hand in like the most lucrative card game in history. Seriously.
Yeah.
But it wasn't just gold, right? Our sources mention ivory, slaves, spices. It's this incredible flow of valuable goods all through the Mali Empire.
You're hitting the nail on the head. The Mali Empire, it was this bustling center for way more than just gold. We get these glimpses into this vast, intricate trade network, But the finer details, a lot of them are lost to time.
It makes you realize just how much history is still out there, waiting to be discovered.
Absolutely. And how, even with a figure as seemingly well-documented as Mansa Musa, there's still an element of mystery.
Okay, but let's talk about the event that really put Mansa Musa on the map, globally speaking. His pilgrimage to Mecca in 1324. This wasn't just a journey of faith, it was an epic spectacle.
Oh, absolutely. Epic is the word.
Give us a sense of the scale.
Okay, picture this. A procession of 60,000 people, that's like a small sleigh on the move, with 12,000 slayers.
12,000.
Yeah, and get this. Each one carrying gold bars weighing up to 4 pounds.
4 pounds each. I can barely carry my groceries some days.
Right. Now imagine trekking across a desert with that.
Wow.
And that was just the start. They had camels laden with gold dust. The entourage was decked out in the finest silks. And he had gifts for everyone. Everyone he encountered along the way. This wasn't just a pilgrimage, it was a statement.
Definitely a statement.
A grand, opulent display of the Mali Empire's wealth and influence.
And that display, it definitely turned heads.
Oh, yeah.
From the markets of Cairo to Mecca itself, word of Mansa Musa and his golden caravan traveled fast. And speaking of Cairo, our sources say his time there caused a bit of a stir, to say the least.
A bit. It was more than a stir. Imagine, you're going about your business, and then the ruler of this powerful, wealthy empire rolls into town.
And starts casually giving away gold like it's nothing.
Exactly.
Talk about generosity. But what was the actual impact of all that gold flooding into Cairo?
Well, some accounts say that Mansa Musa's spending actually affected the value of gold in Egypt for years.
Wow. He really did leave his mark.
He did.
But was all of this just about showing off his wealth?
That's the question, isn't it? It's tough to say you're sure, but there are a few things to consider. Generosity, for one. It's one of the 5 pillars of Islam. And Mansa Musa, he was known for his devout faith.
That's true.
And he was also a skilled diplomat. When he first got to Cairo, there was a little incident.
An incident. What happened?
Well, he refused to bow before the Mamluk Sultan al-Nasir Muhammad. Now, back then, that was a serious breach of protocol.
I bet.
But Mansa Musa, he explained that he bows only to God. And you know what? This act of, well, independence, it seems like it actually impressed the Sultan.
Really?
They ended up developing a pretty strong relationship, which, to me, says a lot about Mansa Musa.
Like what?
He could handle a delicate political situation. He was more than just a king with a lot of gold. He was clever, strategic.
It's fascinating, isn't it?
It really is.
This guy, he's like a walking contradiction in a way. A devout Muslim who turned tradition on its head, a king wielding generosity and, let's be real, military might.
Exactly. Those contradictions, they're part of what makes him so interesting.
They really do.
But before we go too far down the Cairo rabbit hole,
Right.
we should probably talk about what happened when Mansa Musa got back to Mali, because his journey,
Yeah.
the impact, it didn't stop there. In fact, some would say it was just beginning. Because when Mansa Musa got back, you see, he didn't just bring, souvenirs. He brought back knowledge, ideas, a whole vision for his empire.
It's like he went on a pilgrimage and came back with a shopping list for turning Timbuktu
Into what?
into the intellectual center of the Islamic world, it seems like.
Exactly. He
Right.
wasn't content with just, having the most gold. He wanted the brightest minds, too.
Yeah.
So he becomes this patron, this driving force. And Timbuktu, it transforms into this hub of scholarship with these incredible mosques, libraries overflowing with texts from all over.
We're not just talking like your average scrolls here. I
Yeah.
mean, we have sources talking about the Sankor Madrasa, this renowned university in Timbuktu, attracting the leading thinkers of the day. What was it like being there? Paint us a picture.
Imagine a place bustling with debate, where you've got astronomy, mathematics, law, literature.
Oh, wow.
All these disciplines weren't just studied, they were challenged, debated, advanced. Sankor Madrasa, it became this melting pot. You had scholars coming from as far as Persia, Al-Andalus, all drawn to the heart of the Mali Empire.
It really makes you think, this image of Africa that many had back then, the dark continent and all that.
Right.
And here you have this incredible center of learning, flourishing,
Yeah.
really challenges our perceptions of history.
Oh, absolutely. And Mansa Musa's vision, it helped create this legacy, scholarship, intellectual curiosity. It all radiated out from Timbuktu, impacting not just Mali, but the wider Islamic world.
It's remarkable. And it wasn't just about attracting the scholars, was it? He brought back architects, artisans, people who could really reshape the Mali landscape.
Precisely. Remember those stories about Mansa Musa building a mosque every Friday on his travels?
Oh, yeah.
That same passion, it came back to Mali with him. He gets these skilled architects from his journey, tasks them with constructing magnificent mosques, buildings. The Djingaribur Mosque in Timbuktu, we think it was designed by an Andalusian architect. Just amazing.
A beautiful blend of style.
Exactly.
It's like he understood that true power isn't just about wealth, but about knowledge, about the things that last.
And it's not just these grand gestures either. Our sources, they describe this thriving urban landscape across Mali during his reign.
Right.
Over 400 cities flourishing.
That's incredible.
It wasn't just about him, you see. He invested in the prosperity of the whole kingdom.
Okay, but earlier you mentioned there are, how did you put it, two sides to his legacy. Not everyone views Mansa Musa as this, benevolent scholar king we've been discussing. What's the other side of the coin?
That's where things get really interesting, you see. We have these Arabic sources, like what Al-Umari wrote, praising his piety, generosity. But then we look at the Mandinka people.
Yeah.
They've got their own oral histories passed down for generations. And a more complex picture comes out.
Oh, really? Like what?
Well, some criticize him, say he strayed too far from tradition, that his pilgrimage, extravagant as it was, went against their values.
Interesting.
And they question, the long-term economic impact of all that spending.
So it's like two sides of the same coin.
Exactly. And that's what's so great about history, isn't it? Rarely black and white.
The shades of gray.
The shades of gray, that's where the good stuff is. Like in the Mandinka tradition, there's this figure,
Fujigi.
Seems to be a mix of Mansa Musa and other figures from their history. And this Fujigi is linked to both Islamic practices and, older beliefs. It suggests a more, controversial side, maybe, than some accounts let on.
Fascinating how these oral histories can do that, provide a whole different viewpoint.
You really do.
Makes you realize even someone as seemingly well-documented as Mansa Musa There are still layers to uncover, debates still going on centuries later.
Absolutely. That's why digging into all these sources is so crucial. Each one gives us a new angle on the past. And it's by piecing those together, that's how we get closer to the truth.
This is why I love these deep dives. We started with, what, a mountain of gold?
Yeah.
Now we're questioning how whole cultures interpret the past. But before we go too far down that rabbit hole,
Right.
let's loop back to Mansa Musa's wealth for a sec. Some stories say his spending actually caused economic turmoil, maybe even, crashed the Egyptian economy. Is there any truth to that?
Well, it's a story that's been told and retold for centuries, that's for sure. And our sources do point to, that massive influx of gold Mansa Musa brought into Cairo. Definitely seems like it caused a dip in its value. But did it actually crash the whole economy? Debatable.
Yeah.
Maybe it's more accurate to say it. Shook things up a bit, disrupted the markets.
I can only imagine what those merchants must have thought. Here comes this king, and he can single-handedly shift the price of gold just by, spending a few coins.
Yeah.
But it makes you wonder, how do we even put his wealth into today's terms? I mean, a gold back then versus, the stock market now. How do you even compare?
It's the question, isn't it? Historians, economists, they've been wrestling with that for ages. And you're right, it's pretty much impossible to slap a modern-day price tag on it. It's almost like some scholars even say those stories about him, wrecking economies with his generosity. It wasn't really about precise economics. It was more about conveying this aura, this almost mythical aura he had.
So less about a 14th century Forbes list and more about understanding the sheer power, the influence that came with controlling so much of the world's gold back then.
Exactly. And it's something that still resonates, this idea that wealth, especially on that scale, it has ripples. It doesn't just sit there. It shapes economies, influences cultures, even centuries later.
Like a butterfly effect, but for gold. One king goes on a pilgrimage, and the effects are felt across the globe. But as we've talked about, Mansa Musa, he was more than just his wealth. A scholar, a patron of the arts, devoutly Muslim. What do you think he'd make of the world today? Just throwing it out there.
Now there's a thought. It is tempting to picture him, right? In our modern world.
Right.
Would he be on the cover of Time magazine? Would he be using his influence for, I don't know, education, cultural exchange?
He'd definitely have millions of social media followers.
I'm sure he would. But maybe the real takeaway from Mansa Musa, it's not about picturing him in our time. It's about the impact he had, the legacy, because he reminds us leadership, real leadership. It's not just about having wealth. It's about what you do with it.
Empowering others.
Exactly. Fostering knowledge, making a positive impact on the world around you. That's what lasts.
What a journey this has been. We started with a mountain of gold and ended up, in a hall of mirrors almost, questioning how we see wealth, power, even the stories we tell about history itself.
And like we often find on these dives, the more you learn, the more you realize there's always more to uncover. Mansa Musa, he's this fascinating mix. Gold, faith, scholarship, ambition. It's a story that'll keep people talking for centuries, I'm sure.
It definitely will. So to our listeners, we'll leave you with this. If you had the wealth of Mansa Musa, what mark would you leave on the world?